day. This is a Porsche 911, probably the best all-round sports car in the world, bar none. It is without doubt the standard bearer from the Stuttgart firm. It is the jewel in their crown, despite not being the biggest seller in terms of numbers. Yet the continued presence of the 911 allows the Porsche cognoscenti to forgive the company when it does big ungainly SUVs such as the Cayenne, or the slightly challenging looking Panamera saloon, or it dallies with four-cylinder engines in the 718 Boxster and Cayman. Yet Porsche haven't been, well, adverse to taking some risks with the 911 through the years. We've had full convertibles, we've had Targa, we've had automatic gearboxes, there's been some component sharing with the lower Boxster way back in the late 1990s. They've even gone from air-cooled to water-cooled. And on the base Carreras, they're now moved away from normal aspiration and given them turbochargers. Yet to electrify one would probably have been a step too far. Probably you would have had pitchforks and burning torches outside the gates of Zuffenhausen if horsepower had given away to kilowatts on the 911 range. Yet Porsche, they still wanted to build an EV, and they have. Just not a 911. No, for their first stab at an EV, Porsche didn't electrify a current model. They built an entirely new one. And what a car they built. Welcome everyone to the Porsche Taycan. The Taycan was first previewed by the Mission E concept back in 2015. And it's fair to say not a lot has actually changed since that initial concept. Most concept cars promise the world and never ever deliver, but the Mission E actually really did become the Taycan. A couple of things that changed: the rear hinge doors of the concept have become conventional forward hinge doors, and the promise of a wireless charging through a sort of base plate, well, that has yet to fail to see the light of day. But pretty much everything else, bar a few changes, have seen, well, production. Taycan comes in 3 variants, and it was launched at the 2019 Frankfurt Motor Show. We were there. It comes in 3 variants. There's the 4S, which is the base car, the Turbo, which is the spec we have here, and the Turbo S range topper. Now, the Turbo and the Turbo S, let's just deal with this badging policy. Porsche say that Turbo now means flagship in their range. It doesn't necessarily just mean a turbocharged engine. Little bit disappointing, I think. I think it's marketing gone a bit mad. I think if Porsche were to delve into the back catalogue of names, then something like GTS would probably have been suffice for the flagship cars. The 2 flagships, the 2 turbo cars, only really differ in their overboost facility in terms of mechanical setup, but we'll come on to that a little bit later. I'm of the opinion that Porsche is right at the top of its styling game at the moment. Even the Cayenne and the Panamera are, well, shall we say, slightly more palatable than they used to be. Let's call them handsome rather than beautiful. But the Taycan really is a sharp looking car. I just absolutely love the way that they've conveyed a sports car in a sort of 4-door form. And this beautiful sculpted bonnet that just comes between these 2 cowled headlights stuck into the inset into the front wings is phenomenal. And also when the car's not equipped with the glass panoramic roof, you've got this lovely, just sort of corrugated look to it that aids airflow and mimics the 2 lines going down the bonnet. It's smaller than a Panamera in Porsche's sort of like range, if you like. If you think of it as a 2+2 with rear doors, then you're probably not far short of it. It's a bit bigger than a 4-door 911. That would be doing it a disservice. Back in the late 1980s, early 90s, Porsche toyed with the idea of a 4-door 911 called the 989. It never really passed concept stage, but this car actually really reminds me of that concept. You've got a reasonable amount of space back here for two people. Take the car it really reminds me of is a little bit like an Aston Martin Rapide, where that car is sort of like, to do it, a disservice, is like a four-door DB9. It's not a big saloon car, it's not meant to be. It's meant to just give a little bit more practicality over its coupe cousin. And this is what Taycan does for me. Be very comfortable for four to lop across Europe in something like this. The car itself has the batteries in a sort of skateboard architecture underneath the car, but even so there's actually quite good space for my feet in here. This seat's set up for myself and I'm 5'7", 5'8", so I'm not particularly tall, but I've got plenty knee room. There's reasonable headroom. I mean, I wouldn't want to wear a hat in it. But for MD over 6 foot, it might be a little bit of a struggle, but certainly for children, or they've got isofix points in the rear, this makes an awful lot of sense if you're progressing out of something like 911 or Cayman. The boot's a good size too, at 366 litres, and it goes all the way out to the back of the back seats. Now the car does look like a hatchback, but it's not. It's a conventional boot. You've also got an additional 81 litres at the front of the car. Why wouldn't you have? It's a Porsche. It's not like they've stuck an engine up there. There was a lot of fuss made originally with the Taycan when it first came out with its EPA rating on its range. Now Porsche say, according to WLTP figures, you should get around about 270 miles out of the car. So realistically, it's probably going to be about 250. Now that's pretty good, again, given the level of performance of the car. But what's really impressive is the rate at which it accepts a charge. It will take up to 270 kilowatts quite easily if you can find a charger to do that. Now the problem there, of course, is the UK's woefully inadequate charging structure. But never mind about that, it's actually pretty good, especially if you were thinking about going across to the continent where you've got use of Ionity charging. Now there's a subscription available from that with Porsche once you take delivery of a car for a limited amount of time. Otherwise, you're probably looking at around about 90 minutes to take 80% from a fast 50 kilowatt charger. But if you can find a charger that will give you much more than that, something around about the 270 kilowatts, then you can go between 5 to 80% in just over 20 minutes. That's impressive. We first sat in the Taycan at the Frankfurt Motor Show when it launched last year in 2019, and then earlier this year I should say, we were lucky enough to be invited up to the media launch up in London to see the car again. And everyone I've sat in has had a different sort of interior. This particular Turbo has a leather-free option, which is okay in places and not so good in others. I like this sort of weird kind of woven material in the seat inners, and they've got Alcantara on the sides, but then it counters with a little bit of kind of just grey vinyl here, and that's not great. I mean, obviously other colours are available. I mean, and it does in a lighter colour, because I've sat in one with a real light interior, it lifts it away from the sort of like the coal hole interiors, if you remember Porsche from the late 1980s with the 944 and the 911s. It's actually quite a familiar look as well. You've got this beauty, I mean, it's all screens. There's no sort of dials and analog dials, save for the Sport Chrono stopwatch up on top of the dashboard. Everything else is a screen. You've got this curved binnacle, very reminiscent of the Porsche 5-dial cluster, and you can configure this depending obviously on what you want to see. It takes a bit of getting used to, and it takes a bit of learning. You've also got the center screen here for the car systems and some of your infotainment and your menus, and then this one down here which is for your climate control. And you've also got, rather than, if you don't want to press this screen, there's also a little touchpad here. Now what's weird is some of it's got this haptic feedback, which I love. If you're going to do away with buttons on a car, that's fine, but have some kind of way of knowing I've pressed the button. And down on this screen you have it, but on this one you don't for some reason. So it's here, haptics down here, not up there. There's also some buttons around the side of the binnacle as well, depending obviously what you need to see, your lights, fog lights, traction control system, or PSM, Porsche Stability Management, adaptive dampers, ride height control. And you'll also notice there isn't a any form of transmission lever in here. It's this stubby lever up here on the dashboard, so that takes a little bit getting used to as well. The wheels, typical Porsche steering wheel, though there's nothing alien about this. This one's wrapped in Alcantara, and we've got our drive mode selector on the side here, which is very familiar Porsche, and that goes from normal, sport, plus individual, where you can tailor it to yourself, and then back to the range, where you obviously getting the maximum range. The seats are really, really comfortable. I mean, I've done, albeit we've only had the car for a day, I've done quite good miles in it. You can adjust the headrests in and out, which is nice. They've got memory positioning. They hold you well. Of course, they're quite thin at the back where your shoulders are, so the rear seat passengers have got a good view forward. And the car itself, I mean, the glass around the vehicle is pretty good. There's a tiny little bit of blind spot in the back 3/4, but you expect that in something like a sports GT car. This has got quite a few options, and this has got the Bose sound system, which sounds superb. Obviously you've got Bluetooth, and you've got the raft of driver assistant packages, which you can have, you know, lane keep assist, radar guided cruise control, all the stuff that we've come to sort of expect on motor cars these days. As I say, at first it's a lot to take in, especially when you look at something like the new Polestar 2 and, well, Tesla Model 3. There's no getting away from their very clean, very simple designs. This is about as clean and simple as Porsche's probably going to be, because obviously there is a lot for the driver to do. There's a lot for you to set up. There's a lot for you to engage with. And once you've done all of that, it's there, it's visible, it's nice, it's easy to see. The only thing I will say is these side buttons up on the binnacle. When the wheel's in my position, my hand's there, I've kind of got to just look around it. But I mean, I'm nitpicking with that, I really am. The rest of it is very, very good. Of course, the downside with screens is they get loads of fingerprints on them, but just an excuse to clean your car if you're that way inclined. It's also a very comfortable car. I mean, obviously we've seen that in the road section, we'll see that in the road section, but you know, as I say, a long distance in the car, the driving position is straight on. I mean, again, going way back to when I first started driving Porsches back in the 1980s, when your legs and your arms are all over the place. This is a really nice, straightforward driving position, and that goes along with what I was saying about the car's GT capabilities, because you just don't feel tired at the end of the journey. And coupled with that beautifully sublime suspension on the adaptive dampers, it's a really, really nice car to spend time in, especially if you've got a big drive ahead of you. Now, before we get underway and take this car out on the road and see what it's actually like, let's crunch some numbers, shall we? And they're pretty serious numbers. You see, the Taycan Turbo produces a not insignificant 625 brake horsepower as standard. Now, I say as standard because actually what it does when you activate launch control, it has an overboost facility, which takes it up to 680 brake horsepower. The Turbo S produces the same as the basic turbo in base power, but overboost on that car is over 700 brake horsepower. Now that's some pretty serious power on an electric car. And as I say, we're used to seeing these drag races on YouTube, but the difference is the Taycan will do it again and again because it runs an 800 volt system. So the performance isn't hampered by the car overheating. It's staying constantly cool because it's more than capable of it. But that 0 to 60 time on a standard turbo is just a shade over 3 seconds. Now that's kidney warpingly fast. That is just more than anybody will ever actually need. But it's not that figure that stood out for me. No, not at all. The figure that stood out for me was this: your acceleration from 50 miles per hour to 75 miles per hour. Want to take a guess? 1.9. 1.9. Now imagine doing 50 on a motorway and you need to squeeze out past a truck or on a little crowded B road. 1.9 takes you up to 75 miles an hour from 50. There's little I can think of that would be more comfortable than this. Certainly even for 4 and luggage. I mean, that's the impressive thing. And it's a full EV. I know I keep saying it, I keep coming back to it, but that's the difference. Now, we talked earlier about, or talked before about the 800 volt system that Porsche uses in the car, which basically allows a lot better cooling in the car, so the performance is accessible all the time. And that's important because, let's be fair, it is a Porsche, so it is a performance car, and that has to be there. And it's not just the standing start at traffic lights or, you know, top speed runs or whatever, you know, I mean, but top speed where permissible is 165 miles an hour, so, you know, it's not a slouch. It certainly isn't a slouch. But it's the efficiency at which it does that, and of course the charging system is very important to Porsche too. You know, the fact that you can, if you find the charger, like I say, you can charge it up quite quickly and get on your way. I mean, that's what makes this, to me, a real continent crushing GT car. But when you want to turn the wick up, when you want to get it into sport or sport plus, and you can see the damper, I'm now in sport, you can see the dampers have now, or you can feel the dampers have now firmed up. The steering also, this is the optional steering that's on this car, which is standard on the Turbo S, and it just gives it that little bit of kick at the back as well, a little bit of rear steer as well, and it just makes it a bit sharper. It's a little bit, it's good, it's very good. You know, there's a lovely feel through the wheel, and you do know where they're pointing, but there's also a little bit of detachment with it, a little bit of, I don't know, it's I don't know how to really sum it up. It's a weird feeling, you know. Maybe it's the fact that obviously with EVs you don't have the transmission, you don't have the gear lever, and you're fully engaged with the drive, and whereas this, it's, well, you're pushing a pedal and you're turning a wheel. Maybe it's that, but it just lacks a little bit of involvement. And I'm talking of a nuance of involvement. We're not talking of something you're going to get in and it feels like a Toyota Prius to drive and the steering's all light and you go, this is a bit horrible, and the body rolls up. It's not that at all. It's a world away from that. It's as good as, you know, a BMW M product or a Mercedes AMG product in terms of its drivability. It's just that last maybe tenth that makes something like a 911 GT3 as sharp as it is. It's just lacking that. But that's it. Now the brakes are worth talking about as well, because Porsche don't really do regeneration on the car. And it was interesting, I was talking to the man from Porsche this morning, and what they've done is they've set it up to coast, because again, they're trying to maximize the range. Now, regeneration's good from the point of view, if you stop-start traffic, it harnesses the energy that's used by the brakes, put back in the battery and make it go a little bit longer. Taycan isn't really about that. It's not really doing that in terms of the stop-start traffic. It's thinking about, Porsche are thinking about, where are our customers going to drive it? Where are they going to drive the car? Is it going to be a long-range car, which probably would be in most cases. And in that case, what you want it to be is very efficient in its drive line, and that, when you're on these faster open roads and you're constantly on power in an EV, you're using battery. There's little chance of on and off power. So what Taycan is set up to do is basically, when it comes off the power, it coasts. So it allows you to use less energy going forward. And I could see that this morning on the motorway drive back. It was just, the way it was set up just made absolute sense, and it's probably the best EV I've driven on a motorway, not just from the point of view of comfort or anything, but from the point of view of how it uses its power and how efficient it actually is. Now, I digressed a little bit there because we were going to talk about the brakes. So the standard 4S has standard steel brakes, which on a Porsche are still fine. Porsche build some of the best brakes that I've ever driven in a road car. They are quite simply sensational. The Turbo gets a specially coated disc. Now you can tell that the discs that come on the Turbo, because they have a white caliper. You can't really see it on this car because the aero wheels cover the caliper. And then the Turbo S goes to the Porsche ceramic composite braking system. Now the Turbo's brakes and the Turbo S's, Turbo S's ceramics are optional on the Turbo and on the 4S, and the standard Turbo brakes are also an option on the 4S. Does that make sense? So you get two brake options on a 4S, one on a Turbo, and carbon ceramic is standard on the Turbo S. I mean, you know, I've been running the Mini electric for the last 5 months. So, and that, as I said to you, is great because it's the world's, in my opinion, and we said it first, the world's first hot hatch EV. You know, Tesla maybe built the Roadster all those years ago, but my God, Porsche have taken the EV sports car and they've made it theirs. They really have. I think if, as a petrol head, you were worried about EVs and saying that, you know what, this new wave of electric power, it's killing the enjoyment of sports cars, it's going to kill off supercars. Really isn't. Not by a long shot. Not when you drive this. The feel, the character, everything about it just reeks Porsche. You can feel the DNA of Porsche through the whole car. You know, the weight of the steering, as I say, okay, the styling of the instrument clusters is very reminiscent of the old 911s. In fact, tell you what it really does remind me of is the oval dash I had in my 1985 944 and my 1993 968 Sport. That's what it reminds me of, except it's digital. Now it's time to talk about the handling of the car. It's time that we discussed handling. We've done performance, we've done a bit of steering, but the actual handling of it, how does it handle? Well, it handles very, very neutrally. You can, I haven't, I may add, you can get the tail out of this car, even though it is essentially, it's four-wheel drive, because you've got a motor mounted at the front, you've got a motor mounted at the rear, so it is a four-wheel drive car. But you can, with the stability systems off, you can really, really kick the back end of the car out. But it's balanced. It's not scary. You know, gone are the old days of 911s throwing stockbrokers through hedges. You know, I mean, the fact that Porsche can still make a rear-engine car handle as beautifully as a 911 just astounds me and defies physics and all the rest of it. So when you come to this, which has no real weight, you know, at one end in particular, because there's a motor mounted at the front and there's a motor at the back, and obviously there's no engine at, you know, beyond the axle lines for obvious reasons. It is a beautifully balanced car, and it talks to you. The dampers, they've set it up, and again, this is okay, it's not standard across the range. It's got adjustable dampers on this. In fact, I'm in sport mode. I'm going to go back to normal because I'm about to join the motorway. But you know, on some of the back roads today, just you could really lean on the car. You could really lean on it and just get it tucked in and apply the power, and it just dug in and it just went. Now, as I say, on a wet road, or being a little bit of a hooligan with, you know, your stability management systems all switched off, and as I say, I'm not going to do that, then as I say, we can really see that they've set it up like a proper sports car. They've set it up like a Porsche, so your enjoyment of that intimacy that you get with any type of performance car is not sanitized here at all. It's there, and it's there to be enjoyed. It's there to be indulged, if I'm honest. It's there to be had. And why wouldn't you? It's a £130,000 Porsche. If you buy this car and spend your day driving around London wanting to be seen, you're a fool, because this car is, its talents, its bucket of talents is full to the brim, and it's way more capable than I would ever be as a driver. It is absolutely bang on the money. Well done, Porsche. This is phenomenal. Now, the car we have here today is the mid-range turbo specification, which starts at £115,000. This particular car we've got here is optioned up to £131,000, but the range does start with the Taycan 4S at £83,000, and obviously you have the flagship Turbo S at £138,000. Now, that's before the government grant, so it's not a cheap car, let's be perfectly honest. I mean, even a base 4S, by the time you spec it, is £100,000. The issue I have a little bit, however, is the fact with some of the options. £210 additional cost for a Type 2 charging cable. Really, Porsche? You couldn't just throw that in? £291 for rear side airbags. They're not standard on a £100,000 car. And don't get me started on the £443 for a motorised charging flap. Now at the moment there isn't really a great deal of EV competition for the Taycan. I mean, on the base 4S I suppose, with some basic specification, and the closest rival you're going to be looking at is maybe something like the Tesla Model S, but it is a bit more of a saloon car and the Taycan is a bit more of a sports car. But it's a natural sort of assumption to make that that's the closest rival. But here's the rub. We know how good the Taycan really is. We know how good its performance and how good its handling is. So maybe now is the turning point where we stop comparing them to other EVs and we start comparing them to piston engine cars. I mean, why shouldn't you? I mean, something like this, at this price, you're looking at Mercedes AMG GT 4-door. Panamera itself, even maybe the hybrid one or the turbo even with some specification. I mean, maybe this is the turning point. Maybe it's now that we stop saying it's good for an EV and just start saying, well, it's an alternative, a bit like diesel used to be to petrol. This is another one of these cars where that applies. So here's what we like and what we don't like about the new Porsche Taycan Turbo. We like its outstanding performance, its subliminal ride and precise handling, the styling, the onboard tech, and the fact that it drives like a proper Porsche should. We don't like, it can feel slightly disengaging compared to real out-and-out sports cars at times. The price can get high with some options, and that turbo badge still grates. Other than that, not a lot else. You know, when delivering a verdict on a £130,000 Super EV like the Taycan Turbo, you have to remain a little bit objective. I mean, this isn't an everyday car for everyday people. It's not really meant to be, but then nor is it meant to be a garage queen or a track day special or something like that. It is a superbly capable car, and there's no reason why, if you can stretch to the budget, then you can't use this as an everyday motor car. Why not? It proves that it can be done, and it proves that EVs have got to the point where it can be used like that. Now, what I'm going to say is this. The only thing I can really find to critique about the car is this. There is a little bit of a disengagement from it when you compare it to something else in the Porsche's range. Think about it like this. If you were to play Queen's album Sheer Heart Attack on a really good Lin system deck on vinyl, that's about precisely as much as you're going to enjoy that album. That's a GT3 RS. That's what that is. This is a little bit like listening to it on a really good MP3 player through a sensational set of speakers. You can still play it really loud, you can still enjoy the album. It's just that it's that little bit more disengaged than the vinyl. That doesn't make it a bad album. This is probably one of the best GT cars that I've ever driven, and I have been fortunate enough to drive quite a few of them, and that is across EV and petrol and diesel. It is a superbly capable car. Porsche have come to the EV market with this, and it is the first of many because they have said the new Macan will be an EV. It's phenomenal. No, it's sensational. It is really that good. Thanks for watching. We'll see you again soon. So, you've watched our video. It's now my job to tell you to like and subscribe and press the little bell button to receive notification of when our next video is uploaded. Sorry, what's that? You want more than just videos? Okay, did you know that AutoEV is also a website? That's right, autoev.co.uk. Not only is it all the latest news, reviews and musings, including motorsport from the electric vehicle world, but we've got literally hundreds of used electric vehicles for sale from dealers up and down the country.